Hi everyone, my name is Leela Sinha and welcome back to Impolite Conversations, a project of the Intensives Institute. And I'm working with ideas of power, I'm working with ideas of innovation, I'm working with ideas of transformative, ethical holding of power and leadership, and I'm glad you're here with me. So I need to lead off by saying that I got 4 hours of sleep last night. My body is just not cooperating with the usual, 7, 8 hours thing right now. And one of the things that I've been thinking about in conjunction, among other things, with the sleep deprivation, because when I'm sleep deprived, when I'm not sleeping well, I don't get up at 6. But the problem with that is my body wants to get up at 6. It really wants to be up. It wants to be awake. It wants to be thinking. It wants to be doing things at 6 a.m. And I know that that's, for a lot of intensives especially, that's not the case. A lot of folks prefer to be up later, prefer to get up at 10, get up at noon. Your natural chronotype has you up and like alert until maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. I'm at the other end of the chronotype scale. So 6 a.m. is my natural rising time. And unfortunately, when I can't get to sleep, or when, like last night, my brain is being really rude and what is in my head is not a thing I want to go to sleep with, I end up staying up late and I can't make up for it on the other end. I still wake up at 6. So there's this impulse to movement that I've been living with for, I don't know, maybe 10 years now. It came up the first time I noticed it, it was 2011, and I was studying massage in Portugal. Yes, I was studying massage in Portugal, and I noticed that my body was asking for movement in a way that it never, ever had. I was not an athlete as a child. I was not an athlete as a young adult. There was nothing about my life up until that point that had indicated that I was going to want to move at all, ever. I was a bookworm. I like to sit in a chair and read things and go places in my mind, or maybe travel, but not too much work, not too much physical working out. Also, I have some kind of weird condition that nobody can diagnose that means that I dehydrate really easily and I have to be really good about my electrolyte replenishment, and that has only really become easy in the last couple of years. So there were other factors, but there was nothing about me, about my life that indicated that I would ever want to be an athlete. So I'm in Portugal in 2011 studying massage, and suddenly my body decides that movement is a thing that it would like to do. And I'm like, what? Okay. Because I'm pretty plugged into my body. Like, my body doesn't usually surprise me like this, but I'm pretty connected. So, okay. So one morning I wake up at 6 a.m. and our classes don't start till 10. And it's a beautiful little village on the ocean that we're staying in. And so I get up and I open the patio doors to my room in the shared apartment that all the students have shared apartment living. I open the patio doors from my room and I go out on the patio and I tiptoe down the pool stairs so that the pool wasn't something we were using, but we were kind of there in the off season. Anyway, so I tiptoe down the pool stairs and I find myself on the street of Praia de Luz at like 6:30 in the morning. And that's not a terrible time to be awake in a seaside town. I had gone to Portugal from Maine, which is also an early rising seaside town, coastal kind of place. So there are people out and about, but not too many. And so I started walking toward the beach. Why not? And it was about a mile from the apartment to the beach. So I walked to the beach and I kind of wished that I had been prepared to go swimming when I got there, because it was a little warm and I love being in the water and I still had time. So the next day I got up and I put on my swim trunks and a sports bra and I walked toward the beach. And when I got to the beach, I got in the water and then I got out and I let myself dry out on the sand and then I walked home. And then I put on my clothes and went to class. And that worked out pretty well. So I started a routine where that was what I did every morning. I got up around 6 or 6:30 and I left the house and I went to the beach. And one day when I was on my way to the beach, my body said, "Can we run?" And I said, "I don't know, can we?" And my body said, "Let's." And so I decided to take this attitude toward running where I was just going to play. You know, like 2-year-olds are in their bodies when they're like, I want to run. And so they just run. And then they stop when they're done running, when it doesn't feel good anymore. And so I did that. And morning after morning, I did that. I got up and I walked until I felt like running, and I ran until I felt like walking, and then I walked until I felt like running, and then I got to the beach, and then I got in the water and cooled off and got to swim, and then I went back to my apartment, and then I went to class. And it changed me because I had never been a person who did regular exercise, really ever, ever, ever. Like it just wasn't a thing. And what was more important is I was having fun. I was enjoying myself, but also I was burning off adrenaline and cortisol. Being in class for someone with, autism and rejection sensitive dysphoria and any number of kinds of trauma in my history, being in class was always anxious making, no matter what I did to be less anxious. It just it didn't matter if they weren't being mean to me, which they weren't. Being evaluated, being watched, being observed. I know I'm on YouTube. Being evaluated, being watched, being observed was always really hard on me. So I had these elevated levels of adrenaline and cortisol and anxiety, and running them off helped, right? Because adrenaline and cortisol are the things that are supposed to help us run away from tigers. So if you run, it actually uses the chemistry in the way it was intended, and that makes life easier. So it was better for my mental health. It was good for my physical health, not because I lost weight, because I don't think I did, not because I got stronger, although I was getting stronger anyway because I was in a very physical massage program. But just because I was in relationship with my body and with movement in a different way from the way I ever had been before. So I did that when I was there, and then I went back to Maine, and it was really hard to maintain anything like that, so I didn't. And then I moved within Maine, and it was a little easier to do some stuff kind of movement-y, and then I got into this really intimate relationship with the Atlantic Ocean. And that helped because I was living really close to the water, and so I could walk down to the water and take off my outer clothes. If I had my bathing suit and or my wetsuit with me, I could just take off the outer clothes, have the bathing suit on, jump in the water. And it was a lot like that experience in Portugal of having this ready, easy access to very physical activity. Now, the ocean in Maine is not conducive to swimming year round. So when the waves turn to slush, and they do actually turn to slush when it gets really cold, when the waves got cold, when the water got cold, and eventually the waves turned to slush, of course I wasn't swimming in it. Sometimes I would walk for miles on the beach. And that was also good. There was this kind of cadence and this rhythm that came from walking, like the physiological kinesthetic cadence of walking was somehow therapeutic. The waves, we now know the sound and rhythm of waves is actually therapeutic. They've done a bunch of research. So again, dealing with elevated levels of stress, going down to the water, doing some physical thing, right? But then I moved out of that part of Maine and I moved to California, which I thought would be, similarly accessible, but it didn't turn out that way. I moved to the Bay Area, and here in the Bay Area, we have a lot of things going on. First of all, the Pacific Ocean is colder and less polite than the Atlantic by an order of magnitude. So it's actually more dangerous to engage with the ocean. I don't live as close to the water as I used to. The water that I have lived relatively close to hasn't been a great place for walking. There's a lot going on. I could drive to places where it's easier to do the kinds of things that I used to do. Not the swimming part, but at least the walking part. But those are an hour away, so it becomes this big production. So I didn't really do as much movement as I used to, but I could feel that itch again, right? I could feel that need for movement, especially starting in 2016 when I moved here, 2017, 2018, right? That tension, that stress level building, and I could feel the need for movement. I couldn't figure out how to get it in. And then the pandemic hit, right? And then here comes the pandemic. Oh, joy. And with the pandemic came this compression of my physical environment. So even though I hadn't been going out that much, I had been going for walks. I had been sometimes going out to one of the local preserves, one of the local parks, and there's this really short, like up and down hike. You go to the top, you get kind of a cool view of the bay, and then you go back down. It wasn't too big, it wasn't too overwhelming. It was really dry though. The air being dry has been a really interesting difference for me ecologically. Anyway, so I was getting a little movement, a little bit of movement, a little movement. The pandemic hit. My entire world compressed, basically to the size of the room I was living in at the time, which was about 13 by 15 feet, which is not a bad size for one room. And it wasn't like I couldn't be in the rest of the house. But something about the way that we were supposed to stay in shrank me. And that shrinking was really hard. Up until the pandemic, I had been, from July until the end of December, I had been dancing regularly, half an hour-ish, every morning, just dancing, like free-form dancing. I would put on a playlist from Spotify, and I would set a timer and just go to town in my room, in my underwear, nobody watching, generally with my headphones in, or very quietly playing on my bed so as not to disturb my housemate. And it had been another one of those moments where it had changed me, right? It had this consistent relationship with movement and this consistent relationship with the musculature of my body, not just because I wanted it to do X or do Y, but because I was moving in it and it was moving me. And I started to find the ways in which emotion could move me, could move my body, and could, in fact, release itself. And so it wasn't anymore just about the biochemistry of stress and exercise. It became about something greater or deeper or more spiritual or something. Something. And so I went into the pandemic and shrank. And I stayed completely shrunk until I finally talked myself into, of all things, a VR headset, which is quite an extravagant expense. But I knew in my bones I had to do something, and I couldn't figure out what to do, and I couldn't get myself out of the house. It was like right before I left Maine, and I could no longer get myself to the beach. I knew something was wrong. I knew something had to change, and I finally just threw up my hands and changed what I possibly could imagine changing. And so as an early birthday gift to myself, I got myself a VR headset, and I started playing physical computer games just to get my body moving. Just to get my body moving. Any kind of movement, please, body, something. How can I entice you? How can I make it sweeter? How can I make it open to you? And begrudgingly at first it said, okay, fine. And it was fun. And so I kind of overdid it at first, and I actually gave myself an overworking my body injury for the first time in my life. I gave myself a sports injury, essentially. And see, it's still even hard for me to think of it as sports, but it's athletics, right? And the game that I play the most actually has some folks in there who refer to the people who are playing as athletes. And so when I go into that virtual space, I have somebody calling me an athlete, that name athlete. And what is it to name, right? What does it mean to name? I've talked about that some on this channel, but being named an athlete is also this mind shift, this transformation. Just like a couple years earlier, when somebody said to me, oh, it's not that you don't like sports. And I said, what? And they said, no, it's not that you dislike sports at all. It's that you don't like what you were taught were sports. You like adventure sports. And I thought, oh my God. Oh my God, I do. I like adventure sports. What are adventure sports? Surfing, I'm not very good at it, but I love it. Surfing, open water swimming, horseback riding, something that I may never be able to do properly because I have a back injury. But the things, rock climbing, right? I did rock climb for about 6 months in Portland, Oregon around 2007. And it was fantastic. And I don't, I come by this rightly. I have a pretty conflicted relationship with a lot of things that I inherited from my parents. But one of the things that I really did honestly come by rightly is that hiking and outdoor sports, my father used to be a rock climber and an ice climber way back in the day. Way back in the day. He's in his, let's just say that he's old enough. He's reasonably old enough to be my father, and I'm in my 40s. And so I have had these like little spurts of awareness and little spurts of identity adjustment. Like, oh, I'm an athlete. Oh, I move. Oh, movement is a thing that I do. But this last period between July and December of 2019, I had been dancing for 6 months, pretty much every morning. And it was doing something for me that wasn't at all about biochemistry in the usual sense. It wasn't about cortisol. It wasn't about adrenaline. It was about spirit. And it was about emotion, and it was about processing and releasing that. And I knew that that was a thing, but I didn't really know in my bones that that was a thing until I did it. And then I did it kind of unexpectedly. And it wasn't just bad stuff, like good stuff, everything. Like all of it was coming through the dance. Interestingly, during that period, I did very little painting. Anyway, so I was still, and then I started working out. But it's a very structured kind of working out. When you're playing a game, there's a thing you're supposed to do, and you do it, right? It's not free form. It's not expressive. It's just movement, which is good. Movement is good. I'm getting stronger. My traps have never been this strong. There's a lot of arm flailing in this game. But there's something more. And I was resistant to TikTok at first, but I did finally get myself an account so that I could go scrolling through TikTok. And one of the things that I've come across is native TikTok, which has a lot of talking and explanation and demonstration of dance, right? There's a lot of video of dance. There are some that are like meant to be teaching and demonstrations. There are some that are just video of dance. And somebody in one of the TikToks, and I wish I could remember where, said, I think she was talking about etiquette at a powwow, and she was saying, if somebody is dancing, don't like go up and take a picture with them while they're dancing. Well, I mean, okay, yes, of course. I mean, obviously not as, if it were obvious enough, she wouldn't have had to say it, but she said it, so it's obviously not obvious enough, which is unfortunate. But the thing that she said after that was that, they're in this moment of prayer, they're in this moment of engagement with spirit, they're in this moment of transformation. And then she says, and whenever they're working out in their dancing, like don't interfere with that. And for some reason, that was a light bulb moment for me because it hadn't processed through that, of course, those dances are that same, that thing of bodies moving to be in concert with spirit and to work things out of our literal muscles and bones. Now, there's some Western theorizing around that too. Things like, the book The Body Keeps a Score, somatics, the work of Peter Levine and Bessel van der Kolk, some of the more recent work on polyvagal theory with Stephen Porges and Deb Dana, among other really brilliant scholars working on this stuff. So the ways that our bodies and our emotions are connected are becoming better understood by Western medicine, which is good because they're catching up. But as I've been processing all of this, and as I have slowly been coming out of this pandemic compression, it's been a year, I just can't stay compressed anymore. I'm going for more walks, but I'm also starting to dance again. It's been a very still year. It's been a very compressed year. It's been a very smooshed year for many of us. And the sensation of pressure only gets worse when you add more molecules or more entities to the same four walls, the same space, the same box, right? Pressure goes up when you add more stuff and you don't increase the space. That's physics. And so many of us have been feeling this increased pressure and the lack of room to move. And so we're vibrating almost in place because we haven't had the space to move in any other way. So here we are, right? And I'm beginning to dance again, and I'm beginning to walk again, and I'm still doing my exercise thing, but I'm doing other stuff too, which is better for me anyway. And mixing it up, getting out there, starting to move, starting to feel like my bones belong to me again. This concept of exorcism, of expungement, of movement as a way to connect with what's most real, but also as a way to release what needs to be released, good or bad, to express what needs to be expressed, good or bad. We're doing this now. We're doing this, and as the vaccines roll out, and if we are lucky, nothing else happens to drive us back into lockdown, we're doing this. We're expanding. We're becoming expanded again. We're occupying space again, or perhaps for the first time. A lot of people are discovering things about themselves, and those things are going to emerge chrysalis style when the pandemic lockdown eases back and we come out of our spaces and our places and perhaps out from behind our masks again. For some of us, it's emerging into a different reality as a different person. For others of us, we're going to find that people that we knew are emerging as different people, really, from the people that they went into lockdown as. And we are going to start to move. And some of the things we haven't been able to exercise for a whole year, we haven't been able to get rid of them for a whole year. And now they're going to move. They're going to move through our bodies. They're going to come out through our muscles and our skins if we let them. So we have to let them. We have to create spaces for our movement. We have to create spaces for our movement, our individual movement, our global transformational movement also. But in this case, what I mean is our movement. We can't not give ourselves room for that. We can't not make space. And we, in our space making for ourselves, have to recognize that there are a lot of other people also trying to take up more space than maybe they have in a year, maybe they ever did. And we are becoming into this world with all of this pent up, a lot of it, pain and sorrow and grief and challenge, right? A lot of it is hard stuff. A lot of it is hard stuff. And so what are we doing? What are we doing? How are we going to bring ourselves forward into this new way of being? How are we going to dance? How are we going to allow ourselves to exorcise all of the things we have carried through this year, all of the things we are carrying forward? How are we going to allow ourselves the room to move? And I mean to move not as though no one is watching, but as though the greatest forces in the world are there with you. dancing alongside you, making the whole transformation, releasing the suffering, celebrating the joys with you, with all of us, together. Thank you for listening.